What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. I am Kyle Nabors along with Sean Hammond. It is Friday morning, February 23rd, and we are just a couple days away from the NFL Combine down in Indianapolis. The NFL offseason finally starting to kick up, Sean, which is great to hear because, frankly, I'm tired of rumors and hearsay. We need some actual news.
Yeah, we're gonna actually talk to some of these athletes and coaches and GMs and get the ball rolling on the off season. It's always fun. I mean, you know, uh, who knows what's in store over the next couple of months, but this is kind of that kickoff. We're gonna see. We're gonna get to hear from Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus and kind of get into their mindset as they're approaching the draft and really the whole off season.
Yeah, we of course got to visit yesterday with the first time the Bears' new coaching staff and Eric Washington and Shane Waldron. We'll get into that here in a few minutes. We want to hit on the latest with Justin Fields, silliness going on with social media, and then of course we'll be talking about the combine with you guys this morning. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Sean_Hammond. You can find Sean there. You can find myself at Kyle Nabors. You can find all of our content on Twitter at Bears_Insider. Of course, go to shawlocal.com. You'll find all of our content there. You'll also find our latest column from Mark Silverman from Waddle and Sylvie. He's got 5 thoughts that unite Bears fans. He's had some columns recently that have been pretty divisive. So he went the opposite route, Sean, this week and tried to give us 5 reasons that Bears fans should feel good and feel united. I thought he did a pretty good job.
All right. Yeah, no, that's I'm sure he was tired of hearing the negativity coming his way, but you know what? He was he was dropping some honesty, and that's what Bears fans need sometimes.
So I do my best to make sure to tune into Chicago sports radio throughout the week, a couple days a week, including listening to Waddle and Sylvie. And it's a tough time to be a sports talk radio host in Chicago, just because it's so polarized. People have such strong opinions already about like where this should go. It's our job, right? It's what we do.
Mm-hmm.
It's what gets us through the off season. But at the same time, like, we've reached the point where there's no new information, and everything in the information sphere is parsed so much and so minutely that it can drive you a bit insane.
Yeah, I mean, nothing has changed in the last month, and that doesn't mean the conversation has stopped, of course. And you know what? Yeah, I have no problem talking about what the Bears should do at quarterback a million times. That's all everybody asks me when I'm out and about in my regular on a weekend or whatever. People want to know what the Bears are going to do.
I grabbed a friend. I grabbed dinner with a friend last night down in Naperville. I hadn't seen in a couple months, and one of the first things out of his mouth was, "What are the Bears going to do?" And so that was the first 20 minutes of our conversation. It's and he's a Packers fan, actually. It's anyone who is interested in the NFL is interested in what's happening in Chicago, and it's making it fun. I mean, it's a really, really unique offseason to be sitting here, not just with the number 1 pick, but to be sitting with the number 9 pick. So a lot to discuss here. We'll get into the combine, as I said, and get into Justin Fields a little bit. But Sean, as Alan Dunlap, a regular here on the show, asked us this morning, he says, "I know the attention was on Shane Waldron, but what were your impressions of the new defensive coordinator?"
Yeah, I was very impressed with Eric Washington. I mean, neither of those guys, Shane Waldron or Eric Washington, said anything that was super surprising. They kind of said what you expected them to say, but I like the presence that Eric Washington brought into the room. I liked the way that, he sort of like you could feel him filling the room. One, he's a big dude. Like, he's a really big guy. I don't know if you could see that over the broadcast, but in the room with him, like, he's a big dude. And 2, like, he's got that deep voice, and he seems like he's the type of leader that you want, regardless of X's and O's and stuff like that. I think he's the type of guy that you want speaking in the room, and the type of guy that the players are going to listen to and respect. And so all of that seems like a positive sign to me. And then
jump in there?
Yeah,
I think the biggest takeaway there was it seemed very complimentary to what Matt Eberflus has established with that defense and
Yes.
what they want to do. Like listening to those two gentlemen talk yesterday, I felt very confident that they are lock and step together.
Mm-hmm.
I think of course, as you said, like the thing you talk about winning press conferences, it's easier to win press conferences because we don't know what the X's and O's are going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
So let's set that aside. You've done this enough. You've interviewed enough people. Like you can go through interviews and first process and be like, I think that guy gets it. Or like, I'm a little like what I'm hearing from you and from what I took away was that like, I felt pretty confident in what they got at the defensive coordinator position.
Yeah, he absolutely seems like a guy who gets it. And I actually really like that he was clear about the fact that he wants to call plays again eventually. He sees that in his future, and the fact that he's willing to put that aside and say, okay, well, Matt Eberflus did a really nice job at the the second half of the year calling plays for this defense. I'm okay with him keeping that role. I'm going to do everything else that we need out of a defensive coordinator. He can call the plays. That's fine. If he gets tied up doing head coaching stuff, talking with the offense, I can handle it for a series or whatever, whatever the team needs. And, he didn't beat around that bush, saying like, oh, it's not a big deal. Like he said, yeah, I want to do that in the future, of course. But he's going to do what's right for the team. And I think that, they all understand that Matt Eberflus found a rhythm doing that last year.
I did think it was revealing where Matt Eberflus said, or like there could be times where there's a play or two where he does hand duties over because he's got to check in with the offense or special teams, and that was at times overwhelming last year. And listen, like any reporter could have been like, can you name a couple examples? And it's not like he ever would have said, but that's one of those times where it's like, from our perspective, from a learning perspective of how this, how we talk about it, I would love to know, right? Like, just like, can you give us a couple examples? Like, okay, you clearly, you're saying that publicly, which means you learned from it, which is good. Like, that's what we want to know. Like, I want to know, like, all right, so what did you learn? Like, what exactly happened that you learned from that? That, okay, I need to be able to hand this off occasionally.
No, that would be a great thing to, if I can ever get Matt, outside of a podium setting, that would be a great thing to ask. And, I think it was hard last year because he didn't have a defensive coordinator he could lean on, like having a coordinator is more than just like throwing a guy out there with a title. Like you got a guy who you trust, who can completely do the job. He's done the job in the past. And Matt did not have that last year. He couldn't hand off.
Which I'll say, which is a bit concerning, right? Because he lost the defensive coordinator, and like what you're saying there, he didn't trust anyone enough to give it to hand that off to anyone else on staff. Like they didn't bring anyone on the outside from the outside, which I can kind of understand. Middle of the season, you've already got.
It's hard when you're in season.
Yeah, but he didn't feel confident enough to hand those responsibilities off to someone else on staff. Now part of that could be the fact that where he was just like, listen, this is going off the rails. And if I'm coaching for my job, I'm going to call the plays, right? That very well could be the case. But I think that it's also probably a combination of those things. So, but again, like it's fine as long as he learned from that, which from what we heard yesterday, it does seem to be the case.
And then I don't think we should overlook either the fact that Eric Washington has worked with some pretty good defensive lines in the past. And, one of the things he said yesterday, I would say like the number one big quote from him was, we want to be the best pass rush in football. And, they have some pieces. They are heading in that direction. Obviously adding Montez Sweat helped a lot. I think from that perspective, like he can really help, Travis Smith, the defensive line coach, who is, he's a great dude. I've loved talking to him. He's probably the most inexperienced of all their position coaches on the defensive side. And so you get another voice in that room that's only going to help. He was here when the Bears, back in 08, 09, 2010, the Bears were building a pretty good defensive line then. He moved to Carolina with Julius Peppers, the second time when he went back there, and he was coaching the D-line there before he became DC, and, worked with guys like Von Miller in Buffalo.
Yeah. Rick checking in this morning with us. Of course, everyone, if you're watching this live on YouTube or on Twitter, you can jump into the comments here. We do throw those up live. If you are watching this after or listening to the podcast version, if you go to the Shaw Local YouTube page, we do appreciate it if you subscribe, give a thumbs up, leave a comment afterwards to help other people find the show. Rick says he was a defensive line coach before, so that should help out the young kids, Pickens and Dexter. Definitely think that's a valid point there from Rick, Sean.
Yeah, I mean, look, those guys got to keep growing. The more good coaches you can get in their ear. This is a guy who's basically been a defensive line coach for the last 15 years, outside of a couple of years when he was the DC in Carolina. And he's only going to help those guys. He's only going to be an asset when you're looking at potentially adding another defensive end opposite Montez Sweat, or maybe a 3 technique. When you're going through this draft process, going through free agency, he's been around the block.
He absolutely has. So, it's strange because you go into this offseason with such an emphasis on the offensive side of the ball and on the quarterback side. So you meet both coordinators yesterday. But really, I felt coming out of that, you learned a lot more, there was a lot more insight on the defensive side of the ball than the offensive side of the ball. And really, that's not all that surprising if you think about it, because Shane Waldron spoke for approximately 15 minutes yesterday, and I don't believe he said Justin Fields or Caleb Williams' name once.
Nope.
Not surprising. It is what it is. They're not going to tip their hand, but that also means we didn't learn a lot from Shane Waldron yesterday and what his philosophy is going to be.
No, you can tell he really towed the line and didn't really say anything of note, other than when, somebody asked him about if he reached out to Justin and he didn't really answer it. And then there was a follow-up. Well, okay, so did you talk to him or not? And he basically said, I think he said that they texted or something. And it's like, okay, cool, whatever. So that's like the most insight we got on anything, whether it's Justin, whether it's Caleb Williams. Obviously, he's going to say that his offense can work with any quarterback. That's why he's here. Of course he believes that. He did that with Geno Smith. He went from Russell Wilson to Geno Smith and had no problem. But yeah, we didn't really learn a whole lot of insight into what he's looking for in the quarterback. I think any coordinator is going to be excited when the team with the number 1 overall pick is reaching out and saying, hey, you want to be our coordinator? Because, in most years that could mean a rookie quarterback. At the same time, I mean, with the experience he had with Geno, I don't think that he would be. I think he would love the challenge of like trying to take Justin's game to the next level. I think he has proven experience doing something like that.
Yeah, there's nothing to read either way there in terms of like which way they're leaning. I completely agree with you. He's completely capable of handling both scenarios. Let's kind of pivot over though to that quarterback talk and this week with Justin Fields.
Mm-hmm.
So like everything happens, the story breaks with like the New York Post with Justin deleting his or unfollowing the Bears or whatever. What do you even make of it at this point, Sean?
I mean, I don't make a whole lot out of it. I don't know. Like on some level, like some guys, just like anybody in life, there's people who take things seriously and people who don't. There's people who social media is important, like your Allen Robinsons, where you're intentionally deleting all your Bears stuff. Like, yeah, that was absolutely a signal. But it's like, you look at, sure, Justin Fields unfollowed the Bears and he said on the podcast with the St. Brown brothers that he just didn't want to see football in his timeline when he's on vacation this week.
Yeah, which is I don't buy it.
I don't know. Yeah, but at the same time, like I'm pretty sure his bio says Chicago Bears. He's got all his pictures from the Bears. It's like I don't know. I kind of believe him when he says don't take the social media so seriously. That was one of his quotes in there, and sure, but I believe that. but at the same time, it's like, yeah, it's a little weird to unfollow the Bears. I mean, even so, like, can't you mute people on social media? Like, can't you just mute them for a week?
Well, yeah, you can, but here's the thing, and this is where what he said kind of falls apart is because he's talking about like he's tired of hearing the talk around him, essentially, is what he says goes on to say on the podcast. But like that's not coming from the Bears Instagram account or really even the NFL Instagram account. Like that's either coming from people like us or people tagging him directly on social media. Like that's if he really wants to get away from that talk, he would just delete social media while he was going on vacation. So that's kind of where like I think he's probably sending a signal there and then saying it in that fashion. With that being said, like I don't take that as him like it's not him. I wouldn't take that as him being upset with anything. It's more probably like I would, if I was him, I'd be tired of being stuck in limbo and having my name like getting tagged all the time with insane things, you know? Like, think about it this way. Like, not only is he gonna get it from like just your normal regular people, but like I'm sure he's going to get it from like the crazy people as well. And like it gets inundating, you know, all that stuff at all times. At some point, yeah, he's just got like there's gonna be a little bit of acting out and to be like, someone make a damn decision for me. I'm tired of sitting like this.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine being in that situation myself. You know, that would be exhausting. And yeah, I would want to turn off the social media too, but I would just delete the app from my phone. But
Yeah,
maybe that's just how I approach it, but I don't know.
All right, let's move on. There's not really anything like you're gonna be able to read out of it or get out of it. It's just it is what it is. Like, at some point, the Bears are gonna pull the trigger here. I've come around to the fact that I'm pretty confident now that it's going to be a trade. It just seems to be trending that way, Sean. Now it's just like, how soon does it happen?
It's the timing.
Yeah, it's the timing, and you know, based on what we saw last year with the number one pick being traded away, do you think that it's going to be a big storyline essentially at the combine next week?
It is.
Do you think that it's going to move in any fashion? Like, I don't expect there to be like breaking news. The Bears have traded Justin Fields, but like, how much work do you think the Bears can get done to get closer to that finish line of being able to make a decision?
I think they can. I'll say this. I think they can do a lot of work toward, you know, gaming out a potential trade with just involving Justin Fields with somebody else. You hear all the time about these guys. You know, they're the GMs, the high level executives at these teams. You know, they got their suites in the hotels in Indianapolis. They know how to get in touch with each other. They go, you know, knock it out. You know, talk about it for a couple hours in the evening or whatever after they got their interviews done and all that stuff. Like, if they want to at least have a really good idea of what they could get for Justin, they're going to have that. You know, they're going to have that. If they don't have that already, they're going to have that after the combine. Now, the real question, in my opinion, the question is more so, you know, have you had enough time with Caleb Williams? You know, have you had you hear about like, you know, when Ryan Pace was you know, sitting down with Mitch Trubisky after his pro day or whatever, like, you know, those you know, 2-3 hour long conversations. Like, you look at the regularly scheduled combine interviews, those are 15 or 20 minutes. You know, you're not going to like really dive deep into your potential number one pick in that amount of time. You need several hours outside of that. And that's possible that they could do that with Caleb this week. I mean, he's, you know, he's going to be around, but at the same time, it's a really busy week. I don't know if I don't know if we've heard yet if he's gonna throw or how much he's actually gonna do at the combine. You know, some of these guys save it for their pro day. Some of them do it at the combine. If he's got a lot going on, he might want to do that later, and that could delay the whole thing. At the same time, I mean, you have all the tape, so you know what he is as a football player. It's more just getting to sit down and really talk with him, really get to understand what makes him tick, so to speak.
Yeah, obviously that's going to be a big emphasis for the Bears this week, not just with Caleb Williams, but you have to assume they're going to be doing that with several of the quarterbacks here,
Yeah.
just to do their due diligence. And it's going to be a really busy week because, not only do you have to worry about, your scouting, you're trying to make sure you have everything in place for your decision with that number one pick. But you also are sitting there at number 9. And then, of course, there's 371 guys in total invited to this year's combine. It's going to be a very, very busy week for the Chicago Bears and Ryan Poles.
Yeah, it's going to be a really busy week. And so, obviously, if you're going to trade Justin, you're knowing that you're drafting somebody with the number one pick, or at least drafting some, even if you trade down a couple spots, you're probably drafting somebody. You're not going to trade Justin otherwise. And so from that perspective, that's the only thing that's got me wondering if this is going to drag out longer, because you want to know who if you have that number one pick, you want to know who you're taking before you trade him. And so, have they had the time to really dive in, not just Caleb, but also Drake May and Jaden Daniels. And so that could be a reason why a Justin Fields trade doesn't happen right away. I mean, we look at last year, they traded the number one pick. I want to say it was March 9th or something like that.
Right before the start of the league new year, right?
Yeah, it was about, a couple days after the combine and, a couple days before free agency started. If I'm a team trading for Justin, I would want to have that done before free agency, but I don't know if that's where the Bears are going to be.
I'm wondering how aggressive teams are going to be because, you're looking at the quarterback market here. Like the Bears, I don't know if it happened at the combine or pretty quickly after, but at some point soon, the offers, if they haven't already, and I don't think they probably have yet, those offers are going to start rolling in for Justin Fields. But the other thing that's going to happen next week, someone is going to try and pry away the number one pick from the Bears. They're going to see how committed the Bears are. Like the Washington, there is a 100% chance that a trade offer is coming from the Washington Commanders. Like everything you see, or they want Caleb Williams.
He's their hometown guy.
Yeah. They brought in an offensive coordinator specifically, with the idea of, well, if we were somehow able to get him, we got Cliff in play. They're going to make a play. Now, I don't think the Bears are going to entertain the offer unless it's something that would be insane. But that's going to happen. And I wonder how many teams are going to present offers for that number one pick. Ryan Poles, not next week, 2 weeks from now, as he comes back from Indianapolis, he could be having to deal with having 2 or 3 offers on the table for Justin Fields while also having a couple offers for that number one pick. I think that's very realistic.
Oh yeah, I think that's absolutely realistic. And I think the wild card in all that is that Washington has a new GM too, and we don't really know how he operates yet. We haven't really gotten to see, is he going to be like the Cardinals guy who was, seems to be trading down constantly, at least, he did last year, or is he going to be aggressive and go up and get the quarterback and start your tenure off with a rookie quarterback who you can build around.
This is Sports Chicago style Triple R with a really interesting point here, which says Magic gets what Magic wants. Price isn't an issue, ante up. So he's referring to Magic Johnson, who is a part of the ownership group that just bought the Washington Commanders. Interesting enough, it was the Washington Commanders were the last professional, or the NFL was the last professional league that this ownership group did not have a team in. They own an NHL, MLS, NBA, MLB, now an NFL team. They've always been aggressive in their ventures. So I think that's a valid point from Triple R there, or Chicago Sports, or Sports Chicago style, that I do think, and I think you see that, Sean, from hiring someone like Cliff Kingsbury, Washington's going to be aggressive in the way, in their management style.
And look, if there's one place you want to be aggressive, it's getting your quarterback. Like that's the time to be aggressive. You're not going to do that for other positions. You're not going to do as much for other positions. It's funny that that is an interesting point from Sports Chicago Style. Yeah, Magic gets what he wants. When we were in Washington for Week 5, I was standing outside the press box. I think I was chatting with our friend Kevin Fishbane, and I saw this big dude coming down the hallway, and I was like, man, that dude's really tall. And then he got a little closer. I was like, oh crap, that's Magic Johnson. I had totally forgotten that he was part of that ownership group. That wasn't in my head that night or whatever. And I was like, oh, Magic Johnson's here.
Why is Magic Johnson wandering around? Man, I forgot. Got in Magic Johnson talk. I forgot where I was going to go now. Yeah.
I mean, Washington is certainly, if there's a team that has the picks to move up and make a trade and do that, they're certainly one of the teams.
That's where it was. I at some point had Waddle and Sylvian, and they were talking about Brad Spielberger over at Pro Football Focus, who does a lot of work with cap stuff. It's terrific. I know he's, you've interviewed him. He's been a terrific source for us over the years while talking about Bears cap issues. And I believe, and he said, and he was talking about a potential trade, right? If Washington wanted to go up to number 1. So obviously his idea was the Bears would get the number 2 pick, the number 40 pick, which is their own pick that they traded for Montez Sweat. They would get Washington first round next year, their second round next year, and then a premium player in the vein of DJ Moore for the Bears to slide back 1 spot. I'm throwing that out there. I'm interested to see anyone in chat to see what you guys think, if that's enough, if you would do that. I think it's an entertaining. I would definitely entertain the offer, but I'm also much more on the border between Justin Fields and Caleb Williams, and I think a lot of people are.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's really going to depend what the evaluation is on Drake May or Jaden Daniels. Would you be comfortable taking one of those guys at number 2? If you
does that mean you're keeping Justin Fields? If you're trading back to
mean, sure. I guess you could make the argument you take Marvin Harrison Jr., but at that point, I would lean towards trying to trade it again. I'm sure somebody's going to want a quarterback. No, so it really does come down to the evaluations of the quarterbacks. I know it's the number 1 pick. I know we're talking about a quarterback, a really highly touted quarterback prospect. I do wonder if you're only moving up 1 spot. It's hard to say. Like, are they really going to get that much? To trade from 1 to 2?
And that's what CJ said. CJ Williams said, need the Ricky Williams type ball. And that to me is the only scenario where the Bears move off of 1 and move off of Caleb Williams at this point, is someone like Washington gets aggressive. That Magic Johnson that we were talking about, like where they just say, listen, we're willing to be silly here.
Yeah.
And you go, it's the odds of a QB hitting at 1 are low enough that even though we really like this guy, we can't pass up this offer. I don't think any team is willing to get to that point. Like the package that Brad Spielberger put out there, I don't think is a realistic. Now, if Washington was to get that aggressive, like I said, that's something I would seriously consider. But yeah, I think that's probably too rich. And it sounds like you're in the same boat there, Sean.
I think it's a little too rich for 1 spot. You got to remember Carolina moved up from 9 to 1. That was a big jump. For Ryan Poles to be comfortable doing that, it had to be a lot. Now, if Washington values Caleb Williams that much, throw all the draft value charts out the window. It doesn't matter. Like, weird things happen with the number 1 pick. And it seems like the price goes up every single year. So is it possible? Sure. I would be a little surprised if they got that much. It's interesting talking about this too, because I'm like thinking about Washington, especially like if they don't pry that pick from the Bears, if they don't get Caleb Williams, could you even see them being a candidate then at 2 to trade down, to just do the exact opposite and find somebody who's willing to to move up for a Drake May or a Jaden Daniels and do the opposite and collect the picks yourself. I mean, you're talking about a first year GM who's coming into a brand new situation. I know Sam Howell is not going to be your answer long term, but he's fine for the time being.
Have you looked at Daniel Jeremiah's second mock draft yet?
I think I did peruse it the other day. I don't.
Okay.
I don't know if I have it quite put to memory well. What's on your mind?
So the thing that stood out to me, or one of the things that stood out to me, was we talk about QBs and Jaden Daniels and stuff. He has JJ McCarthy going 8th overall to the Atlanta Falcons.
Okay.
Which so like that's another, like we're talking combine here, like previewing the combine. Like that's one thing I'm really interested in is I think the obvious consensus is it's going to go Caleb Williams and Drake May. After that, like how many quarterbacks, like, are how high, like it's if JJ McCarthy is breaking into the top 10, like I have to think Daniels is going to be down there, or Daniels has to be in the consideration to break into the top 10. Like then you're starting to talk about, okay, you got 4 quarterbacks in the top 10. I feel much better about one of those wide receivers like Rome Odunze falling to the Bears at number 9.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because a couple of years ago we had that draft where, what was it, the top 5 guys were all defensive players. I think that was 2022.
Yeah.
And it's almost the opposite this year where, I mean, yeah, you're talking wide receiver. I'll also throw out, like, you might take the first defender off the board at 9. Like the way this is shaping up with the receivers, and there's a couple of really good tackles. Yeah, you're probably, especially if 3 or 4 quarterbacks go in the top 10, you're still going to get a really, really good player in that range at number 9, whether that's a receiver, whether that's a tackle, whether that's, possibly the first defender off the board.
What are you focusing on here, or give us a few names that you're kind of interested in seeing down in Indy?
Yeah. Well, I do want to hear Caleb Williams speak. He didn't talk at the end of his college season there. It'll be, I think it will be interesting to see kind of what he has to say about all this. I'm watching the receivers for the same reason that you said just now. Like, that's a big position of need for the Bears. There's going to be some really good ones in the first round, and there's probably going to be some really good ones available for you at number 9. Is that do the Bears want to get the rookie quarterback, get the rookie receiver, and pair those two together? I can absolutely see that playing out. I'm curious to watch those guys, to see those guys, move around a little bit during their sessions. And, I still do think the Bears got to get better on the defensive line. And, I don't know if either that could be with the number 9 pick, that could be a trade down scenario. That could be, if they trade Justin Fields and they have a second round pick or whatever. But, I'm looking at those edge rushers and those defensive tackles and wondering who they might have their eye on.
Yeah, I still think that at the combine, I completely fair, right? Like that's a route they could go. I get a sense, or I have a feeling, I guess, like there's a better chance they spend in free agency on the defensive line. That's the way I think they go. A guy that I'm really interested in learning more about at the draft, and a guy that Daniel Jeremiah has all the way up at number 19 going to the Rams in his second mock draft, is Jackson Powers Johnson, the center.
I'm so glad you brought this up because I was just thinking this. Go ahead. Yeah,
so like there's a couple of things that I find really interesting when it comes to Jackson Powers Johnson, or really like drafting a center overall. Like, one is, if he's going 19 to 20, what do the Bears do there? Because that's a big gap between where the Bears are picking him at number 9 and when they pick again. And then the other thing there is, and I frankly, this is not something I can answer. This is a question that I'd love to ask Coach. This is something I'm sure that will be asked to Matt Eberflus at some point if this was to come to fruition, was how confident do you feel with having a rookie center and a rookie quarterback in the NFL?
Yeah, it's I'm spoiling my weekend story a little bit. I wrote about this for the weekend, but how high is too high to draft a center? Like we haven't seen very few centers go in the top 20 overall. And yeah, like Jackson Powers Johnson is a guy who his stock after the Senior Bowl is just skyrocketed. He was already like considered probably the top center in the draft, and now you're talking about possibly a top 20 pick on this guy. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago, talking about our areas of need for the Bears, and for me, that's like the number one thing. I think they need wide receiver, center. Those are two of the biggest needs for this team, and so yeah, like, could that be a scenario where the Bears trade out of number 9 and move back a little bit and try to get their center in the 18, 19, 20 range, something like that? There's another guy too, out of Duke, Graham Barton. He played tackle for Duke, but I think that was more because he was their best lineman. Early in his career, he was a center, and he projects as a center. You're talking potentially 2 first-round picks at center. That's a huge, especially after they cut Cody Whitehair last week. We haven't really gotten to talk about that. Cody Whitehair and Eddie Jackson gone. And Lucas Patrick's going to be a free agent. Doug Kramer is the only center on this roster right now. They're going to have to address that. I don't think they're going to want to go into the season with Doug Kramer as their starter.
So like then it goes to that question that I was asking, right? And I'll say this: maybe I'm wrong here, and maybe I'm just wrong, and I just am not knowledgeable on it. But like, I would think that having a rookie center and a rookie quarterback would be really it would be very unideal.
I fully agree. I also think you could have some growing pains in year one, and it could turn into a really great situation moving forward. If both those guys get that experience, they go through, they make some mistakes, they're playing together, hopefully both stay healthy, you could have a really good pairing for the future.
Yeah, that's true. Like, maybe you make the evaluate, like you talk to these guys and you're like, they're really smart. Like they can see the field. Just a lot to put on a couple 21-year-old kids here. I want to get quickly here, Sean, before we get out of here, a couple other things. Well, let's hit on, we got a Sports Chicago South says tagging season is here. Any JJ contract news?
No, nothing new. I will say, it seems from years past, it seems like the conversations really pick up toward the end of this window here. The window opens, I forget the dates. I don't have them in front of me. Is the window open now? Yeah, it was Tuesday this week until, they have over a week, 10 days or something to use the franchise tag. And so usually you start hearing those decisions as that deadline nears. So I think we will hear a little bit more in the next week.
Yeah, I don't really have any feel one way or another which way that's leaning. I'm very confident that he's going to be a Bear after that that deadline one way or another. If they don't get the deal done, he's going to get tagged.
Yeah, and I personally, my hunch is that this is going to be a tag because I feel like if they were going to get a deal done, they would have by now. But you never know. So we'll see what the next few days have in store.
Yeah, and the Eddie Jackson thing, did that surprise you at all? Cody Whitehair certainly didn't surprise me.
Yes and no. I don't know. I mean, it makes sense.
It makes sense.
It makes sense. He hasn't been super healthy the last 2 years. He didn't make a ton of impact plays last season. I know he's a veteran and a leader in your locker room, but I don't know if you can pay a guy $18 million if he's not making those big impact plays. He's not creating turnovers. You can't have that be one of your highest paid players because you can use that money elsewhere. You and I talked about this on the show, but I still think they're going to look for a veteran safety in free agency. I don't think you want to have to draft a starter at that spot when your defense was playing such a high level last year.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a case where you see them take at least one, if not two, safeties late in the draft. I think at least for this year, maybe 1 or 2 years, you're going to see a plan, where they rotate kind of veterans through free agency, kind of like what the Bears did when it was Eddie Jackson, when Eddie Jackson was a bit younger and they paired him with Tayshaun Gibson. And Tayshaun Gibson was re-upped several times.
And Clinton Dix was there for a year.
Yeah, that did not go as well as Tayshaun Gibson.
No, it was cool to see Gibson playing in the Super Bowl. I was happy for him. He's a good dude. I could see them, finding maybe a 1 year, $10 million safety, and like draft somebody 3rd, 4th round, and maybe that player develops into your starter a year from now or 2 years from now.
Yeah. All right, Sean, we got anything else that we haven't hit on?
Oh, no, nothing coming to mind that's obvious. I'm excited for next week. I'm excited to get down to Indy and talk to these rookies coming in and of course, talk to Ryan Poles for the first time in a while and Matt Eberflus and, hear what's kind of on their mind, get the ball rolling here.
Yeah, although the Super Bowl was really just a couple weeks ago, it's been a long time really since the Bears played football. So the offseason really is new, but it feels quite old to us. So it's nice. We have finally reached that next part, right? You get into the combine, and it's not long after that the new league year starts and free agency opens, and then really we're off, right?
We're off and running.
We're off and running. So it's gonna be a lot of fun. Sean will be down there in Indianapolis, along with Michael Dwojak will be down there actually assisting them. We got several local kids from Northern Illinois that are going to be down there at the combine. Crystal Lakes, Trevor Keegan from Michigan, Tyler Newbin from Minnesota. Who else? JJ McCarthy, obviously, from LaGrange Park. There's a kid from Hillcrest. I'm blanking. Marquise Irving. I think he goes by Bucky Irving now, which completely threw me off when I read that. I was like, oh, Marquise Irving. That's who that is over in Oregon. So some cool, interesting stories. I know Waddle and Sylvie will be down there broadcasting. Sylvie will have a column that, at shawlocal.com from the combine. It's gonna be a lot of fun. So stick to shawlocal.com. Make sure you follow Sean on Twitter at Sean_Hammond. Follow myself on Twitter at Kyle Nabors, and all of our content at Bears_Insider. One more time, if you could subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate it. Everyone who joined us this morning. For Sean Hammond, I am Kyle Nabors. Everyone have a good weekend. Enjoy the combine. We'll talk to you guys next week.